calm down. Mama, I'm fine, don't worry. Go back out to sea, sail home, sweet home, where the ships must go to get all cleaned up and put away.
Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. My name's Caleb, and this is our weekly adult advocacy stream. So we'll give it a few minutes for some people to log on. Today, we're going to be talking about IHSS reassessments and just kind of some quick things, tips, and tricks that you could do to stay prepared to maximize the benefit as the years continue to go on and you get reassessed every year. So welcome to those who are coming on board now. We'll give it a few minutes because this is a live stream. And forgive me for being a few minutes late, some technical difficulties, but let me know if you can hear me and see me okay, like always. And if the connection's okay before we jump in. All right. So no comments just yet. It looks like we still have some people jumping on now. So again, let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. But we'll go ahead and just jump into it. So welcome, everybody. Happy Friday. I hope everyone's doing all right. If you're new here, we talk about all things special needs related here in California. And so specifically today, we're talking about IHSS. And so if you don't know what IHSS is, welcome to the party here. It is a program that pays you to be a caregiver to somebody with special needs in your life or disabilities. And that could be a child on the spectrum. It could be a loved one with Down syndrome, or it could even be an elderly parent who has, a mental illness going on or physical ailments and disabilities. So let me know if that is you, if you are a caregiver or somebody that cares for somebody in your life, like a child with disabilities or an elderly parent who has a developmental challenge or cognitive delay, rather. But we'll go ahead and get started. Don't forget, for those couple who are on right now, share the stream if you can, like it, tag a friend, tag a support group. That goes a long ways. It brings more people into the stream. Questions can be brought up, which reminds me, please drop a question in the comment section here. I will be happy to kind of go through my own outline and address your questions as best I can. But we'll go ahead and kind of jump into the topic. So let me get my banner up here so you know what the heck we're talking about. So IHSS reassessments. So this is something that a lot of people dread, right? When they get IHSS, you learn that every year you have to be reevaluated. And so commonly asked, why? The main reason is one, just to stay up to date, to make sure that this person's needs are, which most likely are evolving or changing year after year. Some people it's not. Some people it'll be the same needs for years to come. But for a young child, maybe, right? If a child gets approved at age 5, 6, or 7, their needs will probably change as they continue to age into teenage years or into adulthood, right? And same goes for somebody who's already an adult or an elderly person. Needs may change, right? So the biggest reason for the annual assessments is to just follow along with the changes, right? If they are approved in certain areas like bowel and bladder care, because they needed that type of support for many years, but over time they get better and more independent there, that may not be a category that they need support in anymore, right? So IHSS is a category-based benefit program. And so that'll be things like bathing, dressing, using the restroom, right? Or even feeding, meal preparation, driving to and from doctor's appointments, right? So all these different categories are assessed every single year to determine where this person's needs lie within the program. And so sometimes, certain years, your hours with the program may go up, whereas other years they may go down, right? And so, of course, one of the categories that also gets assessed is protective supervision, which is going to be kind of the big one that I know a lot of people have questions about every single week. Protective supervision, if you don't know, is a category that is reserved for people who need 24-hour supervision to remain safe. This is not for elderly people who have a heart condition or somebody with necessarily like a seizure disorder, but rather somebody who is cognitively impaired or has some type of developmental delay, or maybe a mental illness. Maybe you have a loved one with schizophrenia and they're a danger to themselves because they can't control that or keep themselves safe to the extent maybe they used to, right? Hello, Rodney, welcome. So thanks for the comment, Ronnie. And if anybody has questions, sometimes the questions kind of pile up. So I'll try my best to go through them as best I can and kind of stick to the topic. So let me know if you've had an assessment recently, like a reassessment, whether it be your first one or it's been your 10th one. Please feel free to share your own experiences here. We like to learn from others as well. But I'm just going to give you some tips today. Tips to keep it as, realistic as possible. So number one tip I like to start with is not to fear or worry that you're going to say something wrong. Yes, IHSS at times can be really tricky to work with, specifically social workers who may not have a true understanding of maybe it's your child's special needs, right? So we speak with people every single day about how they're really nervous because maybe last year their social worker was really aggressive with them and asked really awkward questions and it was hard to follow. And so thank you, Teresa. And if you want to contact Cult Advocacy, there's our number below. Sarah, welcome back as always. Thanks for the likes and the loves to those who did that. Keep them coming if you can. It really pushes the stream out there so that more and more people can see it and chime in the comment section here. Thanks, Rodney. You shared our website with your daughter. Her firstborn has autism. Okay, great. That's great info, Rodney. Thank you. We'd love to chat with her, and hopefully she'll be able to join the stream today. Usually we're on for about 45 minutes or so, so we'll wrap up probably around 12:45, 12:50-ish. Okay, so going back to the assessment. So again, annual reassessments, right? Maybe you got IHSS last year and you're getting prepared for this next year. If you're being represented by somebody like Galt Advocacy or another advocate firm, they'll be able to give you kind of a guide or an expectation, if you will, right? If Galt Advocacy is representing somebody, you're not necessarily going to get like answers you need to say necessarily. It's not so much that, it's more so about having an expectation of what kind of questions should be asked and what you feel comfortable sharing with a social worker, right? And what I mean by comfortable, I mean by specifically staying on point with what IHSS needs to know, right? There are things IHSS needs to know, and there are things that IHSS doesn't need to know that they might ask for, right? And so if you don't have an advocate or a lawyer or somebody who helps you along that way, we're going to give you some tips about what you could do if you're on your own. But we, of course, will always recommend to seek counsel, seek representation, seek support before you actually ever have a meeting. Just even advice alone can go a long ways. Trust me. So call Galt Advocacy. If you don't know anybody else, Galt Advocacy would love to chat with you. Okay. All right. So number one, I wouldn't put fear into this conversation as much as some people may feel it. The social worker is a human being, right? And they're not perfect, but they are there to do a job. And so when you recognize that this has nothing to do with you personally as the caregiver, it has everything to do with the child or with the loved one who's disabled. This is your job, essentially, right? So it's kind of like having a check-in with the company that you work for, right? And so you have to remember, you can't be there as representation for this person, as their parent, or as their auntie or uncle, or as brother or sister. You are the caregiver, which means you're performing a job. So you are there on behalf of your client, right? If you are there speaking for or with the person you work with, that is your client. So you have to speak to the social worker for your client, not your child or your loved one. That's a huge thing that I like to throw out there to make sure that if you can kind of provide that separation, you'll go a long ways. It can be really difficult if you're caring for your 10-year-old child with autism, like Rodney with your daughter. If her child's autistic, her whole life is this child, right? Your whole life was your daughter. And so when we get a chance to talk about our loved ones, we want to talk about them as our loved one, right? But when you're sitting down in this assessment, that's the last thing you want to do. We're not talking about our loved one right now today with the social worker. We're talking about our client that we work for. That's who we're here to talk about today. right? So everything that you bring up to the social worker needs to revolve around their specific needs that you are getting paid for as their caregiver, nothing else, right? If you have a good relationship with the social worker, of course you can be friendly with them, right? I'm not saying, be super cold, but just remember that most people don't have amazing relationships with their social worker, and it can be a little, formal, if you will. And so to keep it straightforward and simple, talk about the needs, talk about what's changed. And if it's not a significant change, then don't make it sound like one, right? We're not talking about this person's, slight adjustment in this task or this behavior, unless it's really life-changing to them, right? So I'll back up a little bit. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but going back to kind of some points here. So one, it's just be ready, be prepared as best as you can, and don't be worried. Just don't be worried. Easier said than done. But if you need some help, call advocacy or an advocacy firm or a lawyer, somebody who could help prep you for this meeting. Okay. Second thing, be honest. You absolutely want to be honest. You don't want to lie here. This is the government, essentially. This is a program that is ran by Medicaid, if you will, and these are tax dollars being put to work here for this person who needs help. And so the last thing you want to do is lie about anything because you're worried that it might affect a paycheck, right? Let's be honest. As we're talking about this is a paycheck you're receiving every couple of weeks from IHSS. And so, although yes, it is your job and you want to be able to protect this if you need it and if the child or the loved one needs it, you also do not want to lie in any way about their needs. If their needs have changed, you have to bring it up, right? So if last year your 10-year-old was still in diapers and they needed help in the bathroom, most typical 10-year-olds don't need help in the restroom, right? But if you have a child with autism or maybe Down syndrome and they need help in the restroom still, then great, you will get approved time. They will get approved time for bowel and bladder care. But if next year, now they're 11 or maybe they're 12, they're no longer in diapers. Now they can use the restroom on their own, right? You do need to disclose that, because if you don't, you essentially will continue to get paid for a job that you're not necessarily doing anymore, right? So I know it's kind of rather elementary, but keep it honest, right? We want to be honest. We want this to be fair. And so if you have maybe trouble or worry that you may not say this or share this information in a way that can be helpful, that is what an advocate is for, right? We'd be happy to talk with you about how you can relay this information in a way that doesn't completely take away all the hours in that category if they still need some help there. Okay. So a couple of other basic things that I want you to do to get prepared for this meeting. Okay. And quick snippet to go back a little bit. So to reiterate, every year IHSS has to conduct an assessment. Every 12 to 18 months, they're supposed to, where they come to your home and provide a reevaluation. And that's when they're going to ask all the questions about all the different categories. They're going to say, hey, so last year, little Johnny still needed help in the bathroom. Does he still need help today? Right. So it's going to be conversations like that. Same thing goes for protective supervision. If little Johnny has protective supervision, they're going to be reevaluating that every year as well. Michelle, sorry, just joining, and should always have the SOC ready for the social worker. And how do I go about changing the social worker? Okay, so we'll go ahead and just jump into protective supervision a little bit. So this document, the SOC document, I'm assuming she's referring to the SOC 821. There's also the SOC 825. Both are protective supervision forms. They're both needed. Sometimes social workers will ask for them every single year. Sometimes they'll use the same one for a few years and not ask for it again. But you're not wrong, Michelle. It is totally okay and encouraged. If you can get an up-to-date SOC form filled out by the doctor prior to your reassessment, that is great. You're already ahead of the game, right? You just want to make sure that it accurately reflects this individual's needs, specifically for protective supervision. Okay. You don't have to get this form unless the social worker is asking for it. If they ask for it, then you have to. So if you want to get ahead of it and get it, absolutely. Excuse me. Now, your second question is, how do I go about changing the social worker? So it's a great question. I don't have a great answer for you because they make it very difficult. We can't pick and choose the social workers that we work with. They make that very clear, that they want this to be as unbiased as possible. And that's also why they change social workers a lot too. They don't want you having the same social worker for 10 years. Some people do, and maybe in smaller regions, but most individuals who have IHSS, they'll have a new social worker every couple of years. You might get lucky and have one for 3 or 4 years, but the vast majority of IHSS recipients will have a new social worker every couple of years. And the purpose of that is to also just have fresh eyes on the patient, fresh eyes on this client, to make sure that maybe the previous social worker, if they missed something, this new social worker will be able to catch it. So your question is, how do you go about changing the social worker? So my question would be, why would you need to change? If you're working with a social worker who clearly is being inappropriate, using racial, slurs or terms or whatever, if they're being really inappropriate in any way or uncomfortable in any way, you can reach out to the county, speak to a supervisor, and request a social worker. However, the supervisor is only going to approve this request if it kind of falls into one of those categories I just brought up. If they come to find out that it doesn't deem, oh my gosh, I can't speak today. If they deem that it does not meet those standards, then they're not going to replace the social worker with somebody different. If they feel the social worker is just doing their due diligence and they're doing just fine, then you're going to have to work with that social worker until they automatically change it out over the next couple of years. So there's like I said, no real good answer for you, Michelle. But feel free to share privately if you'd like. If you don't want to share here in the comments, if there's a reason why you feel like you need to change the social worker, let us know. Or again, you can always bring it up to your caseworker or the supervisor. So never hurts if you want to reach out to the supervisor and let them know, hey, I think I need a different worker. Here is why. They'll always hear you out for sure. Whether they will actually, move forward on that request, that is up to the situation, up to the scenario, if you will. Thanks, Michelle. Again, wish I had more info for you, but it's a great question. And it's a very common one at that, for sure. Okay, so we talked about, again, trying not to fear the assessment, right? We want to be honest. Now we're going to go into a couple of maybe, I'd say, best practices, okay? So quick tip, or also we talked about collecting the SOC. So that's going to actually kind of, I'm going to lump that into a broader bullet point here, which is have documentation ready, okay? Not just the SOC, but make sure the IEP is up to date if it's a child, right? Make sure the medical documentation and doctor's reports are all up to date, right? You don't want to use information from 3 years ago necessarily unless you have to, right? But if you can gather a couple of things that are up to date and have those prepared and ready, that'll be great for the social worker, because they're going to probably ask for some of those things. If they have protective supervision, have information specifically about protective supervision, right? Maybe an ongoing log if you've been keeping a log, right? An updated SOC form from the doctor, or information from the school if they're still in school age, right? Or a day program like Darnie is mentioning here. So Darnie says, hi, I would like to ask about a day program. Will it affect IHSS hours? So if they're in a day program, you can also provide information about that, how it's going, right? But to answer your question, Darnie, no, a day program will not impact the IHSS eligibility or the hours at all. It could slightly adjust like a very small percentage of it, but you can't, they're not going to take away your IHSS because they're a part of a day program. It can all work together. And I can explain that further in detail if you'd like, but no, you can absolutely ask about like an adult day program if that's who you're referring to. So gathering documentation is really helpful. Again, making sure that everything is in line with what is happening today, right? If they're in school, make sure the IEP is accurately reporting the information that you'd like to relay to the social worker. If you tell the social worker that little Johnny now, maybe last year little Johnny wasn't eloping, but this year little Johnny is eloping. He is running out the front door every chance he gets. He's climbing through the window. If that's not documented in like the regional center paperwork or the IEP with school, the social worker may question this change. So if you're going to bring up anything new that's not in the IEP, it's going to be questioned. So it's great to try your best to get as much of this information as accurately as the day we're at, right? So if it's today, make sure that that document has the behaviors and the concerns that are happening today, not just from last year, okay? Thanks for being here, Darnie. Great questions. Great questions from everybody. Thanks for all the likes and the loves and the comments and shares. If anybody shared the stream, again, that's helpful with just pushing this out to people who need to come across this information. Rita, would you recommend having the SOC 821 during an annual assessment? So we talked about that a few minutes ago, but yeah, you absolutely can. Again, some social workers will ask for it, some social workers won't for annual assessments, right? They will always ask for it when assessing for protective supervision initially. So for annual assessments or reevaluations, they don't always ask for it, but you absolutely can have that done ahead of time, just not too far in advance. You don't want it done 6 months ago necessarily. You could still use it 6 months ago, but yeah, you absolutely can get it done ahead of time. That is being proactive. And so I would not disagree with saying you can get that done beforehand. The downside of not doing it ahead of time is if the social worker asks for it at the assessment, then you will have to go get it. And if you know that it may take 2 months before you can see your doctor or get anything signed by the doctor, you may not get it returned in time before the social worker has to make their complete their assessment. So that's why it is always maybe a good idea to probably entertain that, especially with certain social workers, certain counties. So yes, get the SOC 821 done if you can ahead of time. You're welcome, Rita. Oops, sorry. Hopefully there's not too much of a delay. I'm a little laggy on my side. Okay, so another quick tip for your reassessment. You don't have to do it by yourself. And this is not like a plug for Galt advocacy or having representation. We of course would love to join you, but have a friend, have your spouse there, have somebody who can be there to kind of listen and report and take notes. So a lot of times, social workers, maybe you get your benefit taken away or your child's benefit gets reduced and you want to fight it. It's just maybe in the notes you saw that the social worker wrote something in there that's just not true. And maybe the social worker didn't necessarily lie about it, but maybe it was remembered incorrectly, right? If you go through the appeal process and you have to testify to that, it can be sometimes your word against the social workers, unless you have a witness there. If you have somebody there who's taking active notes for you, they can help kind of keep record of what's actually being said. Now, I know a question probably coming, it may not, but probably coming, is can you record the assessments? And short answer is technically, can you? Yes, but only with permission. If a social worker agrees to having the assessment recorded, wonderful. You have to get them on the recording saying that they're okay being recorded. The likelihood of that happening is like really, really low. Out of the hundreds and hundreds, or at this point, thousands of assessments that Galt Advocacy has been a part of with families, I don't know if there's ever been a time a social worker agreed to being recorded. So social workers are trained internally to deny any requests about being recorded at these home assessments. So the next best thing is to have either your own pen and paper handy or have somebody else joining with a laptop or their own pen and paper handy, writing down as much as they can about what's being discussed. It's kind of like a moderator in a courtroom, right? You can write down every single word that is said, but you can't record it. Not unless the social worker gives permission, which very unlikely that they will actually do. So have somebody there, have a team there, if you will. You can have as many people there as you want, right? I wouldn't recommend necessarily bringing the whole family, but if you want to have 1 or 2 people there as kind of like your support system, you absolutely can. I just would recommend giving them a heads up ahead of time that they cannot say a word. You do not want your support team, if it's 1 or 2 people, talking about this individual, okay? Their whole purpose, unless it's an advocate, if you have an advocate there, they could speak for you. They could speak with you. That's Galt Advocacy's job. But if you have a family friend or a respite worker, maybe it's regional center or like a regional center caseworker, and they're offering to join you for the assessment, that's great. But you don't want them necessarily to say something that can cause some friction with what's actually happening. And so it's better to just have this witness or this person there acting as the witness, acting as the note taker, your support system. The social worker needs to hear from you specifically anyway. Okay. And so the social worker may say that in a kind of an interesting way, but it is the truth. They do need to speak with you as the caregiver. Okay. So Teresa writes, for social worker misconduct, first ask for the supervisor. If you do not get an adequate response for this, there is a way to escalate the CDSS public inquiry response. File a formal staff misconduct or service complaint with California Department of Social Services by calling that number listed or emailing that email. If the misconduct is involved discrimination, you can submit a complaint directly to CDSS within 80 days. Beautiful. Thank you, Teresa. So I think it was Michelle. So Michelle, if you need any of this information, please use it and let us know if you have questions on that, okay? All right, so having somebody there can go a long ways, right? I will, of course, recommend if you are wanting to get prepared as best you can, consult with an expert in the field. That would be us. We're happy to chat with you. So a couple more things, but please, if you have questions, keep them coming. I'm happy to address them as best I can as they continue to roll through. We don't have a huge crowd today, but that's okay. Still some great questions. So at the assessment, I lost my train of thought. I had another thought adjacent to having company with you. I want to talk about the actual scheduling of the assessment. I wanted to make sure I snuck this in here somehow. I was going to save it for later, but I think I want to talk about it now. So a very common scenario that we see is you might get a letter in the mail or a phone call from your social worker saying, hey, we're coming out on September 1st. That's 2 weeks from today. And you get that and you're like, oh my gosh, we can't do that day because we have maybe a family thing, or maybe I have work, I can't be here, or my child's in school that day. It's their first day of school, right? It's important to note that you absolutely have the right to reschedule. But if your social worker gives you a bit of grief about it, I want to warn you, okay? They do technically have the ability to terminate the benefit if you are unable to make that scheduled time, if they're unable to reschedule it. Now, does that make it right? No. Can it be fixed? Yes. So if you truly cannot make that day, I don't want you to freak out, okay? But if you truly can't, relay that information to IHSS. Do your best to get it rescheduled. But if you can't, and if the social worker is like, hey, we have to do it on this day or else, do your best to make that day work. If you can't, there's a very good chance they will close out the benefit and you will have to file an appeal. And you'll have to spend a couple of months going through the appeal process to get that resolved, which it will get resolved, but it can be really tricky, okay? And you may lose out on some funds at that point too if you don't file correctly. So I want to throw that out there because we're talking about reassessments, and that's a really important thing that we see happen all the time is people will call us and say, hey, I've had IHSS for like 5 years. I've never had any issues, but I called to reschedule because I couldn't make the meeting next week. And then I got a letter saying they're canceling my benefit. What the heck? It happens so often. So I want to warn you about that, okay? Just be prepared to have that conversation if you need to, but do everything you can to make that day work if the social worker cannot reschedule, right? Okay. So a couple more tips in regards to what we want to share with IHSS. You're sitting down with the social worker, and now it's time to really start going over the changes, right? We talked about earlier about how you want to be honest. If there's been a change, you want to bring it up, right? You have to remember any little change can impact can impact the benefit. So you want to be careful the way that you word this, the way that you say this. And I don't want to I don't want to give you anxiety or make you overthink it, but you want to be able to share with the social worker very short, very broad, in a very broad way, okay? So if there is an adjustment or a change, be honest about it, but don't go on a tangent. Again, we talked about how this is a meeting with the client that you're working with and a social worker. This is not a let's do a deep dive into how I'm feeling personally or have a therapy session with the social worker. It's not it, right? So you want to give the social worker enough information to be able to make an assessment, but not necessarily misinterpret, if you will, right? So for example, if they ask about little Johnny's, bathing needs or bowel and bladder care, right? Last year, little Johnny was in diapers and the social worker asks, hey, has anything changed in that category? And you say, well, he's not in diapers anymore. And so, we've made some progress there. It's going great. So that right there, if that's all you said to a social worker, what do you think they're going to hear? They're going to hear little Johnny's potty trained now. he's not in diapers. Mom's and dad's words were, everything's going great. Amazing. We could just take away the 4 hours a week that we have in that category now. However, what if the reality, though, wasn't actually that? Maybe little Johnny's not in diapers anymore, but he still is soiling himself. He's still wetting himself. You are still having to bring him to the restroom every single time he needs to go. You're still reminding him. You're still in there actively. That's not fully potty trained at that point, right? So you want to be clear, but you don't want to say too little or too much, right? Because you don't want to do the opposite. You don't want to talk about the needs so much to the point where you lose the point. Kind of like what I do when I ramble on these streams. So do your best to stay on point. So instead of saying like, oh yeah, everything's good now. I mean, we help him out a little bit here and there. No, like, be honest, be real. He's no longer in diapers in this scenario, right? He's no longer in diapers, but we still are actively helping him in this category. Now that prompts the social worker to ask more questions. They'll say, oh, okay, so are you saying he's not like fully potty trained? Like, what do you mean by you're actively still helping? Now you get to explain as briefly and broadly as you can. Say, oh, well, we've transitioned him out of diapers. However, he still has accidents if we don't catch it in time. Happens a couple times a week. We still have to remind him when to go, or else an accident will happen. We still have to physically go in there and clean him. He's not there just yet. We're hoping, but not yet, not today. That right there, that won't remove the hours. That'll restrict them a little bit because little Johnny's made some progress, right? But that is how you can kind of go about all these different categories when there's been a change. So you got to, again, be careful. Don't say too little. You don't want to say too much to lose the point, but you want to be specific enough yet brief enough, if that makes sense. Hopefully this is making sense. Let me know in the comments if this is helpful at all, or if you need me to go over any of this anymore. But reassessments can be a little tricky. I know they can be a little scary. So I want to empower you. I want to make you feel confident that it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Just be honest, right? Have somebody there with you. Describe the needs the way that I brought it up so far today. Excuse me. If you're going over protective supervision, which we'll talk a little bit more about here in just a moment, have the documentation prepared for it every year, right? Don't record the meeting, even secretly. You don't want to do that. That's a part of being honest, right? So if I don't see any more questions, so I'm just going to keep going for the next probably 10 minutes or so. So I do want to talk about protective supervision and how that is during the annual assessments. We do have one question here, Maeve. I know a family member whose 10-year-old child eloped from the home, and the police, I'm guessing, had to bring him home. Will that help the case to get protective supervision? Yes. So elopement, if it's tied to a child of this age who is developmentally impaired, if this 10-year-old is autistic or they have some type of special needs where they're developmentally delayed, and the elopement is a manifestation of that disability, then yes, absolutely. If it's a typical 10-year-old and they're just eloping, no, because the elopement has to be caused by an impairment, if that is clear. So the short answer is yes. If this child has special needs, it most certainly can be a helpful thing that you can bring up to the social worker to show. If this was a one-time incident, and the social worker asks, because when you bring up an elopement incident like this with a police report, the social worker will ask, okay, well, how often has he been picked up by the police? If this is the only time that it's happened, then they may see it as just an isolated event. Oh, well, this is not like an ongoing thing. Therefore, elopement isn't much of a concern. It only happened one time, right? So you have to be mindful that if you're going to share an incident report like that, or just an incident in general, if it's a behavior that does happen all the time, but you are actively stopping it from happening, you're not going to have report after report after report, right? My sister Emily, who has Down syndrome, ADHD, bipolar, ODD, she would elope all the time growing up when we were kids. She really only had maybe 3 or 4 successful attempts where police got involved. I say only, that's still kind of a lot, but I swear my parents were really good at caring for her, I promise. There was only a couple of times where we actively actually had to call the police for help, right? She was profoundly disabled. My parents were always on her. They were always watching. So there may have been hundreds of attempts, but only a couple of times were actually successful where it was reported, right? So you want to be clear that if you're providing evidence like that to show your need for something like protective supervision, you want to make sure you're clear about how this was a successful attempt, but here's the list of all these other times where they've attempted to elope, right? So just something to consider. Hugo, how about shower, using the restroom? At what age is a parent responsible? So there is an age guideline that your social worker will love to show you. It's their favorite thing to show when they're talking about a child. But bowel and bladder care typically starts around age 4 for both biological males and biological females. So if the child is around 4 years old and they're still in diapers, they still need help with potty every single day, then that is an age where you can start to get time for that category. For bathing, which would be shower here in this instance for Hugo, that usually starts around age 8. So before those ages, 4 is around restroom time, using the toilet, and then shower, bathing, that's around age 8. So before those ages hit, the only way you'll get time in those categories is if there's an extraordinary need caused because of the disability. And we'll have to go a whole different live to talk about extraordinary needs, but essentially that means getting time approved in a category where you're technically not old enough to get it for. There are special circumstances when that can happen. Teresa, if you have installed cameras like a Ring camera, you do not have to remove them or turn them off. Just notify the social worker. Oh, thank you. That is a great point. I appreciate you bringing that up. So yes, if you have a Ring camera in your living room or something, or on the doorstep, wherever you're doing the assessment, you don't have to turn them off, like Teresa said. It is important to notify the social worker about it, though, because if they come back and say that they're uncomfortable about it, it can cause some challenges. So just make sure that they're aware of it. Thank you, Hugo. Appreciate it. All right, so let's talk about kind of the ending of the assessment and post-assessment stuff, okay? So we talked about some of the best practices and things to do, things not to do, right? I'm actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Before I wrap up towards the end here, I want to talk about some of the not to do's, and not to do's, right? So we've talked about some of the to do's, the not to do's here. So we talked about being honest, right? So we don't want to lie. That's definitely a not to do, if you will. But another thing is to argue with your social worker. This is a really big one. Probably one of the most important things. Okay. This assessment is not a place to hash out your disagreement with the social worker. You can politely disagree with something, or again, if they're being flat out rude and inappropriate, of course, you do not have to continue on with this assessment. You have every right to conclude the assessment and tell them they could take the rest of the day off and you'll speak with their supervisor, right? You absolutely can stand firm in your ground like that. But if you're having a casual conversation with your social worker and they say something that you disagree with, you absolutely can mention that you disagree with that. But what you don't want to do is have an argument battle between you and the social worker about regulations or what you heard on Facebook. Hey, that guy Caleb talked about XYZ. They're not going to care about that information, okay? And there's a really good chance, I hate to say it, there's a good chance that what you're arguing, you're probably wrong. It's a good chance. And so I don't say that to offend you, but these social workers their whole job is to know this benefit inside and out. They may not have everything perfect, right? But there are too many times where a parent or a loved one will come to me and say, hey, the social worker told me this, that can't be right. And it was right. There are some rules that we wish were different with this program. But the reason I say all of that is to say, the assessment is not a time and a place to argue. If the social worker does say something that is just flat out false, they misquote a regulation, they tell you about a rule or a policy that doesn't exist, that is your opportunity not to argue, but to take note, okay? That is when you get to say, oh, interesting. I didn't know about that. Please tell me more. Where can I find that in the regulations? I'd love to look that up. I'd love to learn more about that. That is how you approach a disagreement with a social worker, okay? And even if you want to genuinely look it up yourself, if they tell you something that you truly didn't know about, absolutely take note of it. Say, oh, I didn't know that there was that rule with IHSS. I'm going to take note of that for my record. I'd love to do some research on it. You can even ask them to send you information on it, okay? But if you come to find that that rule doesn't exist, or maybe that regulation that they quoted was flat out backwards, now we have some groundwork to play with when it comes to filing an appeal. Because if you get a denial, or maybe they removed hours and you discover they did it wrongfully because they misapplied a regulation or misapplied a rule, you can absolutely fight that. You can take that to an appeal process, or through an appeal process rather. Hugo, can you explain how the recipient can sign a timesheet being 4 years old? So they can't. So Teresa may have to jump in here. For years, they didn't care if it was the parent signing their own timesheet. Typically, they would want a spouse or somebody else in the household to sign the timesheet. And then the rules changed for a little while where they just would not allow the authorized rep, the caregiver, to sign their own timesheets. And then they allowed it again for a little while. So Teresa, I don't know if you have that handy. We may have to get back to you, Hugo. No, your 4-year-old does not have to sign the timesheets. But if the social worker is okay with you as the caregiver signing it, great. If they say, hey, you can't sign it, you have to have another spouse or another person sign off on it, then that is going to be the case for your situation. As far as the official ruling, I don't remember because it's changed a couple of times. So great question, Hugo. And we'll have to get back to you on that one specifically. But okay, so I think that was the last question there. Okay, so I want to transition to kind of the post-assessment stuff real quick. Hugo said my wife would sign the timesheets on their behalf, but now she is a provider. Okay, so yeah, if you switched providerships, if she's now the provider and you're no longer the provider, then you can sign the timesheet, vice versa. If you're both providers because you have multiple children or multiple loved ones that you're caring for, then to my understanding, you could still sign each other's timesheets. I believe that's still how it works. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Again, great questions. Okay, so once you're wrapping up your assessment, here's a couple of quick things. The social worker has technically 90 days to write their conclusion. So a lot of people, they'll go a month and they start to fear, like, oh my gosh, where's my notice of action? Where's the notice in the mail? What's the decision, right? Technically, they have 90 days, okay? But what I like to do, or like what I've always liked to recommend, is follow like a 30-10-10 rule, meaning wait a month, wait 30 days. If you haven't heard a decision, reach out, follow up, send an email. If you haven't heard anything in a couple of weeks at that point, send another follow-up, check in. If you haven't heard anything from a couple of weeks after that, now we're getting about 2 months deep into this. Now it's time to start pushing the envelope a bit. And that's when you can start pursuing talking to a supervisor or reaching out to an advocate. Because the reason I say this is if 90 days have gone by and you have not received your notice of action, your notice of action is the letter that you receive, okay? That's the one that tells you whether or not you are approved or denied or how many hours you get this year. If 90 days have gone by and you haven't received that, that's a problem, okay? And far too often have we seen IHSS claim that it was sent to you, you just never received it. And that could go kind of poorly for you if you needed to file an appeal. So it's really good to keep record and note of exactly the date and time that you have your assessment and when the deadline should be. So at the assessment, I usually will recommend ask the social worker when they expect to have this wrapped up. And if they say, oh, I should have this wrapped up in 2 weeks, that's when you say, great, I will make note of that on the calendar. If I haven't heard from you by this date, what number or email can I call to follow up to see the status? And they need to give you that information. And you need to stay on top of it and track that. Teresa, if your child is a minor, you can sign the timesheet as their primary caregiver. And if they are an adult, the conservator can sign the timesheet. Okay, thank you, Teresa. What if they're not a conservator, though? Is it another caregiver or another person? I imagine it would just be any adult is what I'm guessing, but I can't remember now. Sorry. Oh, AR, not AT. Okay, I got you. So the authorized representative can sign the timesheet. Okay, thank you, Teresa. Hopefully that helps you go. Alicia, social worker has been attending trainings that includes virtual reality to help them understand certain disabilities. Just FYI, that's amazing. I have not heard this. I know that first responders and like police departments, they're doing a lot of like great trainings right now that were like a big push from a bill, or it was like an agenda that was pushed out like last year, the year before. But I haven't heard social workers attending these virtual trainings. That's cool. We need to look into that, Teresa. I'm very curious to see what that looks like for them. That's great info, Alicia. Thanks for sharing. All right, everybody, we're about running out of time here. Nicole, and I probably Myra are jumping on at 1 o'clock in Spanish. So if you speak Spanish or you know somebody who needs some of this information in Spanish, join our live stream at 1 o'clock with Nicole or Myra, whoever's joining at 1. Alicia, you said it was over on the coast. Okay, we'll look into it. Thanks again. But yeah, if you speak Spanish or know somebody who speaks Spanish, join us at 1 o'clock. It's gonna be all the same information that we've gone over today. So if maybe there was a question or something you wanted to bring up, you didn't get a chance to, you most certainly can in the second stream here. Teresa said, if they aren't conserved, there's a form they will fill out to assign someone to sign the timesheet. It wouldn't be the caregiver. Got it. Thank you, Teresa. Excuse me. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being here and tuning in. If you're new here, thanks for joining. We do this every single Friday. Myself, Dakota, Myra, Nicole, we all kind of interchange streams here. So I'm glad you found us today and got me. We try our best to do this every single Friday at 12 o'clock in English, 1 o'clock in Spanish. Again, if you can share the streams, tag somebody, that goes a long way with pushing a lot of this information out and getting, maybe young parents or new parents in the world of special needs, the information that they're trying to find. So that's always a big help. But thanks for everybody for tuning in, asking great questions. Really appreciate you all. Hope you all have a wonderful Friday, great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.